What's going on, everybody? Here it is on a Monday. We're here to talk about last week's question, and I think it's an important one, and I think it's one that we all should care about. There are issues with the hobby, no doubt about it. No, don't get me wrong, a lot is going great. A lot is going really well. I'm having more fun in the hobby right now than I've ever had. But I feel like there are some dangerous things that are happening on the peripheral that could become an issue for the health of our hobby. And so what I asked last week was a very simple and straightforward question. If you could be put in charge of any hobby company and make any change that you want, what's the one that needs to be changed? Now, will the CEOs of all of the companies come rally around and listen to what we have to say? Probably not. But I think by putting it out there, by sharing some concerns that we have, by sharing some issues that we think are ahead in the road of the hobby, I think that at least what we could do is create some awareness, maybe get some feedback out there for some of those companies that might be listening. If we could start the discussion. So let's start the discussion. Let's talk about some of those concerns. I'll be honest with you. I had a couple of companies I thought everybody would go to. I thought a lot of people would talk about, I would get in front of PSA and I would make this change, or I would get in, Tops or Fanatics. These are the things I would do. But the company that was the most chosen that you all would want to be the heads of was not either one of those. It was not a company I was expecting. It was a company that was a little bit off the radar, but once I started hearing some of the things that you all had to say, it made total perfect sense to me. So that's what we're going to do here is we're going to go through your responses, just like we do each and every week. Again, what makes this fun is the dialogue, and the way you can participate is answering each question each week down below in the comments and sharing your thoughts, so I can bring them out there for us all to talk about. There were 4 companies and I had a lot of responses. I probably had 20 responses this past week on this topic of which company would you want to be in charge of and what would you do? And there were 4 companies that you all chose. One of the companies was chosen by one person. The other responses revolved around 3 companies. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about this right here in just a sec. But first, I got to say a couple of things. First, my buddy Dan of Dan's Vintage Baseball PC, who lives just about as far from me as he possibly could, all the way on the opposite coast. He can almost see the ocean from where he lives, and I'm not far from the ocean on the opposing coast. Well, he is coming out to Sacramento, and tonight we are going to go to dinner together. So I am looking forward to that. To hanging out with my buddy Dan, talking some cards, and getting a meal together. But also this past weekend, I mentioned about a week ago that somebody reached out to me, a viewer of the channel reached out and said, they found a collection of pre-war cards with the biggest names that you could possibly think of. Yes, those names. And I thought it would be interesting to share with the hobby community. So he came by last weekend and we went through a lot of the cards together. He came back this weekend with the rest of the cards. Mind-blowing stuff. I've got a lot of editing ahead of me. We did a lot of filming, but just put that on your horizon. That is down the road. Also, a couple quick announcements. I know. Greg, get to the point. I will. I promise. 1 week from today, Midlife Live number 10. Number 10. Midlife Live is 1 week from tonight. That will be a blast. I will have a preview video later in the week about what to expect for that one. And submissions are open right now down below in the comments. Click on the link if you want to submit your favorite pickup from the month of September for the Midlife Community Show and Tell. So here we go into this discussion. I'm going to start it off with the most surprising series of responses. Caught me off guard. Some really interesting points. Let's check it out.
Some people said I would run Beckett. This first one says, great video, Greg. The contrarian viewpoint has a lot of validity. Helps us to see things from a different angle. Helps us find value while others are following the herd. For this week's question, I'll take Beckett. My first thought was amp up production as my one decision. But when I thought about it, my one decision would be to hire Pete to run it. He has a proven track record for building a grading company. He'll have loyal fans follow and an established brand. They would give PSA a run for their money, might even keep or make them honest. Everyone loves a comeback story. This next one said if I could change anything, it would be Beckett. I would recruit as many SGC graders as possible to elevate BVG into the premier destination for grading vintage cards. This next one says, if I could be in charge of any company, it would be Beckett, BGS, BVG. The change I would make is get investors, partners to pour tons of money into the company to market, advertise, and promote the brand as never before. Make sure everyone in the hobby knows you are serious about competing and overtaking PSA as the best and most trusted slabbing company in the business. Make it easy to submit cards for a reasonable price and get great customer service with incredibly fast return times. Hire only people who are dedicated to the brand and want the company to expand. Show your face in every major card show with a friendly, high-tech booth. I am sure with the proper amount of funding and the right people in charge, you could make this brand the best in the business and finally take down the PSA collector's evil empire. The current climate is perfect for this to happen. And finally, Hall of Fame commenter Bob Boozle says, I'd take on Beckett and launch an ad social media campaign, Journey Back to the Top, in which I document the ups and downs of returning the company back to glory. This would show people that we are making an effort to win back their business while I get a sense of financials, resources, and opportunities.
All right, I was expecting some people to talk about PSA. I was expecting some people to talk about Fanatics. I wasn't really expecting it to be such a popular response to talk about Beckett, but I understand why you did. I mean, there are a lot of collectors out there who are not fans of PSA. For whatever reason, they've had some negative experiences. Now, I am not going to get up here and talk about my good experiences and my bad experiences. I've had both. I am not going to get up here and talk about my positive or negative experiences with SGC, at least not today. And I have had both. I mean, if you watched my video from Friday, well, here I go. If you watched my video from Friday, I did a SGC reveal, and I had a couple of cracked slabs. But over the past 2-3 years, I've had a ton of positive experiences with SGC. But the heart of these responses, it's not that people are pro the Beckett grading company. I don't think that this is about people wanting the Beckett name to rise from the ashes like the Phoenix. I think what it is it's more about a legitimate, sustainable, viable option other than PSA. Because regardless, even if you're a PSA person, even if you're a person who is a big supporter of PSA, you should still want competition, because the competition is going to make the other companies better. If PSA has zero competition, like none, do you think that the prices will go down? Do you think the turnaround times will go down? Do you think that the quality control will go down or up? I don't think so. We all should want competition. We don't want one bank. We don't want one car company. We don't want one energy company. We want multiple, because what they do is they force each other to get better. And what happened when the collector's parent company purchased SGC and brought them into the fold is it immediately brought up the concern from a lot of us that, this is probably going to result in a reduction in competition. This is probably not going to make SGC better. This is probably not going to make PSA better. But let me just say this. As I know that there's a lot of doom and gloom right now. I know a lot of people are frustrated right now. I know wait times have gotten longer. I know that prices aren't coming down. I know that PSA just raised their prices. I get all of that. And I like this response because I really think that Beckett is probably in the position to have the best opportunity to capitalize on what's happening in the grading space. What we have to remind ourselves, because again, what we do is we see a negative thing, we have a negative experience, and then we spiral. We go, this is the end, no. Don't forget, it wasn't that long ago that Beckett was the number one grading company. BGS, the resale prices on BGS cards was higher than PSA. It was higher not that long ago. It was not that long ago that Beckett was grading tons of cards. So things can change. SGC is a perfect example of a company that doesn't have a huge percentage or share of the market starting to really increase their brand and their quality and start to affect the market. They did that. That can happen again. It can happen again. Now, I know there are people out there that are going to say, well, yeah, BGS was selling for more, but that was for modern cards. That wasn't really for vintage cards. In fact, I heard that come up the other night on Sports Cards Live. I think Dylan brought up that point that, BGS was a viable company, but mostly for modern. Things can change. Things can change in any industry. There are a lot of companies that were on top and have fallen from grace. There are a lot of companies that were underdogs that have worked their way up. It was not that long ago that people would look at companies like Toyota and Honda and think that they were cheap vehicles. And now they're looked at as some of the most reliable. This doesn't necessarily mean the end. Now, let's also be real, Greg. Be honest with yourself, Greg, because part of the problem is PSA for the last 2 years has built a serious infrastructure. And that infrastructure of machinery, of staffing, of opening multiple locations instead of just the one in multiple states, in multiple countries, they have absolutely positioned themselves in a really, really good position. No doubt about it. But let's just play pretend for a second. Let's just play pretend for just a second. Now, I know a lot of people are not thrilled with the consolidation of all of these companies into just a few companies. But let's just say for a moment that a company like eBay or Fanatics buys Beckett and infuses a mountain of money and staffing and resources. I know people say, no, that's the last thing I want. Fanatics, who produces cards, can't be grading cards. That's a conflict of interest. Okay, I hear you. I don't necessarily disagree with that. But let's just say for a second that they did. Look at what the growth of Fanatics marketplace has been since they bought PWCC. It has become a major competitor with eBay. If they were to buy Beckett Grading and make it Fanatics Grading, or they were going to start their own grading company, that would immediately change the game. So yes, PSA has made some decisions and some moves that have put them in a very, very prime position. And yes, at times we look around and we think, this is not good. And quite frankly, I don't like the reduction in competition. I don't. But anything can happen. And something will happen. This story is not over. The story of PSA being head and shoulders ahead of everyone else is not over. Things can happen. And one of the things that could happen is a company like Beckett, who used to be a very viable competitor, who used to be a market leader, could regain some traction. How will that happen? It could be a major purchase. It could be a staffing change, like was mentioned in there. Just think if Peter went over to Beckett. Now, I know that I don't know. I'm going to strongly assume that Peter received a very generous package from PSA and collectors when he recently parted from SGC. And I'm guessing that he has plenty of money to not work. But imagine if Beckett offered him more. Because a lot of these compete clauses, they're not as enforceable as one might think. And what's probably the thing that would prevent Peter from coming back is the pile of money that he either received or is receiving. But what if somebody came in with a bigger pile of money? Would shake things up. Imagine if in 3 days, Beckett came out with a major announcement that they hired Peter Steinberg to run Beckett. Would that change things? It would for me. It would for a lot of us. Is that possible? Yes. Is it likely? I'd say no. But if it happened, that would change things. It would change the trajectory of what's happening. And that's the point. Anything can happen. So before we get too doom and gloom, before we think that the end is near, we have to go, we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know what's going to happen next. I would love it if Beckett were to have some sort of infusion of cash and resources to make themselves a viable competitor again. And that's not impossible. It's not.
Some people said I would run Fanatics. My good buddy Tony, Southern Collector 14, says, "Hey Greg, I loved the video. Sven and I are in the same boat with our collection. I have told Larry Doby's story to so many non-collectors after talking about my cards. The corporate thing that I would change is with Fanatics. They have to get back to their roots, the kids. They are outpricing many households. The kids can't do what I did when I was their age. Just get a pack of cards at a convenience store for 50 cents. It has become all about the chase for the big hit, like a get-rich-quick Ponzi scheme. There needs to be an affordable alternative, and it needs to be marketed to kids." This next one says, "Hey Greg, teaching history sounds interesting, and if you can weave sports and cards into it, that would be awesome. Personal finance is also desperately needed today, however. Good luck with your decision. For this week's question, I would be head of Fanatics and dissolve the entire corporation. Sell off all the assets. I'm not a fan of monopolies. I'm also not a fan of too much hype and not a fan of gambling either. I think a shakeup is needed today. To address today's new question, if I could do one thing, for my own fun, I would run tops. I would create a set each year of 700-ish cards on the traditional cardstock that was long abandoned. I would package it in 36-count wax packs, boxes with a stick of gum, and distribute them through the same grocery and confectionery outlets that put them in the corner markets, grocery and department stores like many of us experienced in our youth. And I would limit the total print volume to what it was around 1980. And I would price the packs based on a reasonable adjustment for inflation, since my last real pack rips in 1984. The Bureau of Labor Statistics on my calculator says 15 card packs at 30 cents from 1984 should go for about 94 cents today. Now there is a hobby entry point. Reality says that inflation at every point in the process would mean a price higher than that, but surely it could come in under the current pack prices. Maybe sell it as a loss leader for tops, but the classic experience would be back. And finally, this one says, congrats to Lucy and her team. I miss sports flicks. Agree, Orlando did some downgrading of cards, and I think I am going to go down that path on some of my cards. Very good take on non-collectors. I would be part of Fanatics. I would make refractors the main set, and base cards come maybe one out of every 3 packs to try to bring back set collecting. Make the base tops flagship numbered from 1 to 800 or so, collectible and desirable. Make the factory sets all refractor too. Bring back base tops.
I like a lot of these responses. And I want to use a couple of stories to make a point. To make a point about why I agree with this. What Fanatics has been doing recently, in my humble opinion, has absolutely been gaining them money and market share for right now. But when the major way that people interact with the hobby becomes a gambling component, there are people who are going to get burned. And when people get burned, they usually leave the hobby and they usually don't come back. And there are times where it's not all about the profit, because what you're doing is you're planting seed. I live kind of out in the country, all right? And you will go out in the spring, late winter, early spring, and you will see these farmers are out there doing all sorts of things to their fields, including planting crops. And that costs money. But a few weeks or a couple of months later, there is an abundance of crop. That was an investment that they made by taking care of the fields, plowing the fields, planting the seeds. That cost money, and then later they reap the benefit. The problem is if everything is about gambling and some people are successful and a lot of people aren't and they leave the hobby forever, that's not good long term. That's just not good for the long-term health of the company. I'm going to use a couple of examples besides the one I just did. Number one, yesterday, Sunday, I was out with my wife and my daughter, Lucy, and we went to Costco. And when we got to Costco, we got just a couple of things. And my wife says, is there anything else that I need? Lucy and I looked at each other and we said, well, obviously, we need a hot dog and a Coke for $1.50. I mean, why wouldn't you get a hot dog and a Coke for $1.50 at Costco? It costs Costco more than $1.50 to provide, prepare, serve that hot dog and a Coke. They are absolutely losing money. But you know what they're also doing? They're getting people in the door. They're getting people in the door because people will go, where do you want to go? Oh, well, I'm kind of hungry. Oh, well, let's just grab a hot dog and get a couple of things at Costco instead of the market down the street. At times, you have to lose money to make money. A Costco hot dog is the perfect example, if you ask me. I'm pretty good friends with a longtime high school football coach in the area. And Ed was, he had booster clubs and they did fundraisers for years and years and years. And one of the things he did for years is whenever a boy was born at the local hospital, he would come by and he would drop off a little plastic football with the high school logo on it, meaning, welcome to the family. We can't wait to see you playing football with us in 14 years. Now that booster account that was spending money to buy those, that time and energy that Ed was using to go to the hospital and drop those off and make his first introduction, when very few of those little boys that were just born would end up playing football, is minimal. But what he was doing is saying, welcome to the family. They weren't making money from that. But what they were doing is making a long-term investment. I think that a lot of us can agree that making packs that are affordable, that are appealing to kids, is a long-term investment. It is introducing young kids into the hobby that will either stay in it or maybe come back. Most of you watching this right now, I'm guessing, opened packs of cards as a kid. Imagine if every time you opened a pack of cards, you never got a player from your favorite team, you never got a good player, you just handed over your money for the packs, opened your pack, disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. You probably would have eventually said, man, I've spent a lot of money and I'm not getting anything that I want. Isn't that kind of what's happening for a lot of people when they're spending big money, unaffordable amounts of money on cards in the form of really what has become a camouflaged style of gambling? I think I agree with a lot of these responses that if we don't start planting seeds for future collectors, if all we're doing is producing cards that are big time chases right now for right now profits, the profits might be good now, but you have to have a long-term plan. I started my retirement account when I was 22 years old. That was 24 years ago. I'm not going to see a dime of that money for another 10 or 15 years. I still did it because I knew in the long run, the payoff would be worth it. I kind of feel like it's possible that Fanatics right now is only worried about the current profit. They're not worried about the long-term health. And they need to worry about the long-term health, in my opinion.
Several people said I would run collectors. This first comment says, if I was in charge of PSA, I would require every card to have some kind of small grading report. If the card, I swear, is a 10 when I sent it in and the grader gives it a 9, I need to know why it's a 9. This more or less forces the grader to give each card an accurate grade and not be influenced by the player on the card, the low pop of the card, etc. Is this possible at the present time? No. When you grade 1.6 million cards every month, you don't have time to make a note on every single card you grade. And who can afford to pay $50 to $75 for a card that is only worth $100 in a PSA 10 in order to get the current grading report they offer at a high solution submission level? As the person now in charge of PSA, I need to figure out how I can make this work without slowing down return times to what they were during COVID. I'm pretty sure the current PSA leadership doesn't want this for every card. A, because of the time constraints, and B, because doing so could really put into question the accuracy grading as it currently stands. My dad chimes in and says, "This week's question is the easiest question you've ever given us. If I was in charge of PSA, instead of putting SGC out of business, I would adopt all the things that SGC was doing better than PSA into my company. Quicker turnarounds, better customer relations, consistent grading. Instead of making their company better to compete with SGC, they bought out PSA so their competition was gone. I realize that is the way of the world to eliminate competition so your inferiorities are not exposed. But it's great for PSA. They can now continue to suck. Apparently, it's cheaper to buy out a company than to make your company better." And finally, my buddy Jeremy from California says, "Oh, how I love this question. As the new Collectors Universe CEO and CFO and your overall boss, in this house, we're about to make some changes. My first move is to make SGC a vintage-only grading company. We won't accept anything past 1980 moving forward. To help sell this to the investors, I'll raise the price of SGC to $20 for a guaranteed 5-year period. To encourage all those modern cards graded during the PSA slowdown turnaround, whether due to COVID or backlog. You can now send all your modern SGC slabs for regrading with PSA for a $10 special over the next 6 months. This also applies to your vintage PSA slabs that you want to convert over to SGC. As my commitment to you as a collector, we will finally link the set registry for both brands, if that's your thing. And you'll be able to take part of this if you've submitted cards to either company in the past 2 years. PSA will still accept all cards, vintage or modern, and business will continue as normal. SGC will only specialize in post and pre-war, ending with the great Rickey Henderson rookie card. P.S. We will also size down our grade number on the slabs." Fun question, Greg. Have a nice weekend.
All right, so I am not surprised that some people chose PSA and Collectors, the umbrella company, over PSA to be the company that they would want to run and be in charge of and make some changes to. That doesn't really surprise me. It kind of surprised me that nobody said SGC. Nobody said SGC, and several people said Collectors. Here's the problem. First of all, I've said this many times. I will continue to say this. I think that I'm sad above all else about the current state of the grading situation. I am sad that if I choose PSA, I feel like they're grading pretty harsh right now. I feel like the turnaround times are way too long right now. I feel like the prices are kind of high and they just went up. That is not an ideal situation. So I do still have some other options and I can choose them. One of those options I have chosen. My last 2 grading submissions were to SGC. And I hope that that continues to be an option. I could go to CGC. I could go to Beckett. I could go to those other companies. But it continues to go back to the resale value. And the resale value continues to be the highest for PSA. And with some of the changes happening with SGC, and this is something I'm going to take a look at here pretty soon, is has the difference between a PSA and an SGC card gotten bigger since some of this SGC stuff has happened? Or has it gotten smaller? I have a feeling, because I know a lot of people who are in the hobby, and I have heard lots of people privately, not necessarily on their channel if they have a channel, or not necessarily into the camera, say, a couple have, most haven't, I'm kind of leaning towards getting PSA pickups, cards and PSA holders. It just feels safer now that SGC is a boutique company. If SGC is a boutique company, I guess I got to just buy cards and PSA holders. I've heard multiple people say that, especially privately. I've heard people say that. If that happens, if people start to be less interested in buying cards and SGC holders, if that starts to really happen, then the gap in the resale values will grow. And not long after some of the SGC news happened, I did an episode where I compared the difference. And I've done it a few times, but I did it to see if there was much of a change. And there hadn't been much of a change, but it's been a little while now. And it's something that I will be doing in the next month or two, is looking at that comparison. Again, not every card is the same. So SGC 5 versus a PSA 5, of course. We all understand that it's really about the card at the end of the day. But if you can find two cards that look pretty darn similar in the same grade, you can start to draw at least some conclusions from that. I think it's an interesting situation in which we find ourselves. And I understand the frustration from us in the hobby community. We feel like PSA went and bought their main competitor and then destroyed them. And I know what some of you are saying there. We don't think that happened, Greg. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. What happened is number one looked over, saw number two start to gain on them. So what they did is they eliminated them. Now, they haven't technically erased them yet, but they've erased what they were. The high customer service, the fast turnaround time, the inexpensive cost, a lot of that has gone away, and it has been quickly eroded. And the head of the company is no longer there. I understand the frustration. I'm frustrated. I am frustrated. A lot of you are feeling like you don't have anywhere to send cards now. What do? You don't want to send them to PSA because whatever reason you don't like PSA. The company that you like is basically a shadow of its former self. And you're like, what do? I want to grade my cards. And a lot of people are saying, I just won't grade. The demand for one touches is probably going to go up. But at the same time, and I want us all to be honest for a second. Everybody just be honest with yourself for just a moment. If you owned collectors, if you owned the company, if you were an investor in collectors, a lot of what they've done has been good for their company. They eliminated competition, which allowed them to raise prices, which is going to ultimately allow them to have more revenue. As a collector and a participant in the hobby, I'm frustrated. But if Mr. Burns from The Simpsons was running PSA himself, he'd probably be pretty happy with how things are going. I don't hate PSA. I know a lot of people do. I don't hate SGC. I don't hate Beckett. I don't hate CGC. What I want is I want competition. And I don't like that PSA eliminated their top competitor, especially when it comes to vintage card grading. I don't like that at all. But we can't undo it. The question remains, what decisions do we make moving forward? That's really the question. Because from a business perspective, again, a cutthroat business perspective, what they have done has been good for them. It's not been good for us. And from our perspective, that sucks. That sucks.
And one person said, I would run YouTube. Hall of Famer and all-around great guy Orlando of A Collector's Dream says, thanks for sharing your thoughts. For next week's question, if I was in charge of YouTube, I would change the algorithm to help promote the smaller channels other than the big influencers. More variety is important, and newer collectors can get other opinions than only seeing the bigger influencers who mostly promote investing.
All right. Love this one from Orlando. I love that he went outside the box because a lot of people would say, well, YouTube isn't a hobby company. I disagree. I'm with Orlando. It absolutely is a hobby company. They are a big part of the way I hobby and participate in the hobby. There are times that I'm buying lots of cards, and there are times that I'm putting together lots of episodes. There are times I'm watching a lot of content that other people are pumping out, and it adds a lot of enjoyment for me to the hobby. The thing that's interesting is YouTube has all this power, and the power allows them to promote certain videos and certain channels and not promote other videos and other channels. And there are times where things will come across my feed and I'm like, I've never heard of this. I don't know what this is. I've never heard of this channel. I've never seen that person. And this video will show up and it's like, how did this get here? Well, the way it got here is for whatever reason, the formula that YouTube uses to determine what is or isn't a video worth promoting, promoted it. And generally speaking, when you look at something like YouTube, again, is a business. And that's the thing that all of these have in common, whether it be Beckett or Fanatics or Collectors or YouTube. Their goal is not to provide you with a service or a product or a video that is going to be the best. Their goal, ultimately, of a business is to make as much money as possible. And what YouTube's algorithm does is it is designed to keep you watching YouTube and coming back to YouTube. So if you watch a video and then you leave and then you come back to the comments and you read them and you participate and then you leave and you come back to the comments and you participate and you leave some comments and you leave some likes, that interaction is making YouTube go, this person likes this stuff. Let's send them more of this stuff because then they're going to come back more and then they will see more ads and then we will make more money. So the controversial stuff, when a YouTuber goes out and says, I like paying upcharges because if I pay an upcharge on my PSA order, that means my card got a high grade and went up in value. And people go, oh my gosh, I have to tell him how I don't agree with him. This guy's crazy. By doing that, you're promoting that video. When somebody says something crazy on YouTube and you leave a comment, leaving that comment promotes that video. So per Orlando's comment, a lot of videos, a lot of YouTube content that at times is actually the best content doesn't get pushed out there because it doesn't elicit this visceral reaction. If you like a video, if you subscribed to a channel, if you leave multiple comments, if you like different comments that people have, those things, every time you do that, it's helping promote it. Now they've got this thing where you can like hype a video, I guess, down below where you can like do a thing, you can like hit it, like say, I really like this one. You can only like hype a certain like 3 or 4 of them or something a week. That's like your way of saying, this is really good, push it out there. There are times where I have episodes that will get tons of views. There are times that I have episodes that don't get tons of views. I'll go stretches of a month or two where all my videos are doing great. I'll be in other stretches where my videos aren't getting tons of views. And I've had multiple people say, well, Greg, you've got to do this to your thumbnail. You've got to do this to the title. You've got to say this instead of this. And you've got to, go into optimize these things. And you have to watch these videos on how to hit the algorithm. And they keep saying, I just want to make videos about cards because this is fun for me. And learning about how YouTube is going to like versus dislike my videos isn't super entertaining for me. That's not something that I get. I would rather watch a video from a friend like Shane Shoebox Legends show his next one-of-one superfractor gold vinyl of Josh Gibson. I'd rather watch that then go watch some YouTube episode on how to hit the algorithm. But you're right, Orlando. You're right. What YouTube promotes is not necessarily the best videos, the most informative videos. It promotes the videos that keep people watching the longest. They promote videos that keep people coming back the most and interacting with YouTube the most, because that's what sells the most advertising, and that's what makes them the most money. It's the same issue that PSA and Collectors is doing. Collectors doesn't care if you are mad about upcharges. They don't care if you are mad that the turnaround time is longer than it used to be. Fanatics doesn't care if you think they should be making cards that are at a lower price point to get kids involved. They don't care. The companies care about profits. That's what they care about. And we have a hard time with that because we care about the hobby and we care about the health of the hobby. And when they're doing things that don't help the health of the hobby, they don't help the quality of the hobby, it's only helping the profit for the companies involved in the hobby, we get frustrated. And we go, why are they doing this? Everything PSA is doing has been increasing their profits. Just look at how many cards they're grading now versus 2 years ago. Look at how much they're charging now versus 2 years ago. Look at how long turnaround times are now versus 2 years ago. It's all revolving around profits. From a business perspective, they're killing it. But as hobbyists, we're beside ourselves because we care about this hobby. And I get that. And I feel that. Fanatics wants to sell a $5,000 box of cards, not a bunch of $40 boxes. They don't want to sell $40 boxes. They want to sell, it is way easier for them to sell one $4,000 box than $140 boxes. It's way easier. So guess what they're going to do? Go for the highest profit margin. It's difficult to be a collector in the hobby when the things that many of the corporations are doing are not designed to make the collecting experience better. They're designed to make their accounting sheets better. That's difficult for us. And I understand this because this hobby means more to me than just pictures of guys on cardboard. It means more than that to me. And I understand the frustration very much. For next week's question, here is what I'm curious to hear you all talk about. Rare versus iconic versus nostalgic. Pick one. Why did you pick it? If you could pick one of those, rare versus iconic versus nostalgic, which one is most important in the way you collect? Not in the hobby itself, not in what others should do, but for your collecting style, which of those three is the most important, and why is it the most important? I look forward to hearing your responses to that and sharing them next week. Again, Monday of next week, Midlife Live number 10. And there's something extra special that's going to happen in this one. I'll just say that. And if you've not yet submitted your favorite pickup from the month of September, I am accepting those through Sunday. So use the description down below to get a link and submit that pickup.